In previous videos, we found out who the beast is and who the little horn is. In this video, we will recap that information and then show what the eyes and the mouth of the little horn are. In Revelation 13 verse 1, it tells us a beast rose up out of the sea, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. Then verse 2 tells us this beast was like a leopard, his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. Revelation 13 verse 1 is a reference to Daniel chapter 7, which tells us in verses 3 through 7 that 4 beasts came up out of the sea. The first was a lion, the second like to a bear, the third like a leopard, and the fourth dreadful and terrible with iron teeth. And this fourth beast, Daniel says, had 10 horns. So the beast in Revelation 13 that has 10 horns and 7 heads is a combination of Daniel's 4 beasts, and verse 2 confirms that. It says the beast was like a leopard, had the feet of a bear, and the mouth of a lion. The beast with 7 heads and 10 horns then consists of all 4 of Daniel's beasts. It is the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the terrible beast with 10 horns. Then Revelation 13 verse 3 goes on to say that one of those 7 heads seemed to be wounded to death, but then the deadly wound was healed. So this is a chart of what it's saying right here. The beast is like Daniel's leopard, and Daniel's leopard had 4 heads. So 4 of the beast's heads are the 4 heads of the leopard. The beast has the mouth of Daniel's lion, the feet of Daniel's bear, and the 10 horns of Daniel's terrible beast. These parts of the beast are also explained in Daniel 2. We've already gone through this in the Daniel timeline video, but the 10 horns correspond to the feet of the image in Daniel 2. They're also the 10 toes of the feet. Revelation 17 explains that Babylon sits on this beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, and in verses 9 through 11, it gives a very important riddle. The beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, it says, is the beast that was, is not, yet is, and the 7 heads represent both 7 mountains and 7 kings. Then verse 11 tells us who the beast is. It says, the beast that was and is not is the 8th king. And this is explained as a riddle in verse 10. This is so important because if the riddle in verse 10 is not solved correctly, then the timeline cannot be correct. It says there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue a short space. The 7 kings we know refer to empires. Daniel 7 clarified that. But before we can understand who the 7 kings are, we have to understand who the one that is refers to. And it tells us the beast that was and is not is the king that is, and is also the 8th king, but of the 7 kings. In other words, the king that is refers to the head that was wounded and then healed. So the 5 that are fallen are the lion, the bear, the leopard, the Western Roman Empire, and the Eastern Roman Empire. The one that is refers to the Holy Roman Empire, which was wounded in 1870. It seemed as though it was wounded to death. In fact, no one thinks that it's existing today, but it is. The Holy Roman Empire was removed in 1870, but was restored in 1929 with the creation of Vatican City. The 8th king is the one who had not yet come at the time of the Holy Roman Empire. But it says when he comes, he shall continue only a short space, in other words, a short time. Daniel explains who that 8th king is in chapter 8. In verses 21 through 25, it talks about the goat who was the king of Greece, and that refers to Alexander the Great. And that time frame also corresponds to the leopard of Daniel 7. Chapter 8 says the 4 kingdoms will stand out of Greece, and in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance shall stand up. And notice in verse 25, it says this king of fierce countenance will destroy by peace. This is very important because the king of fierce countenance in Daniel 8 is the 8th king of Revelation 17. It's the king that will go into perdition. It's the king that will stand up against the prince of princes, but be broken without hand. So notice those 3 words, broken without hand. Remember, we're told both the 4th terrible beast in Daniel 7 and the feet of the image in Daniel 2 will be destroyed. Daniel 2 says the feet will be destroyed by a stone that is cut out without hands, that afterwards will be a mountain in the land. And Daniel 7 says the terrible 4th beast will be destroyed by a fiery stream or flame. So the final empire, it says, will be destroyed by a stone that is not cut out with hands, that is also a fiery stream or fiery flame. In other words, a fiery, flaming stone is going to destroy the beast. Later we discover that the fiery, flaming stone actually comes from heaven. Revelation 18 verse 21 says, a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, thus, with violence, shall that great city Babylon be thrown down. In other words, Babylon will be destroyed by a stone that will be cast into the sea by an angel. And notice it says that desolation will occur in 1 hour. So Babylon, who sits on the beast, will be destroyed in 1 hour by a giant burning stone from heaven. It's not a missile, it's a stone that will be thrown down by an angel. In other words, the stone comes from heaven, it comes from the sky, from space. That's what will destroy Babylon, and Babylon sits on the beast. So both the beast and Babylon that sits on the beast will be destroyed by a fiery stream that is a stone from heaven that is not cut out with hands and will become a mountain in the land. And this king of fierce countenance in Daniel 8 is going to be broken without hand. In other words, the king of fierce countenance will be broken by the burning stone from heaven. The king of fierce countenance, therefore, must be ruling at the very end of this timeline. Yet Daniel says it rises out of the 4 kingdoms of Greece, which very clearly rose up after Alexander the Great. However, as we've discussed before, each of those 4 kingdoms, the Antigonid dynasty, the Ptolemaic dynasty, the Seleucid dynasty, and the Attalid dynasty all correspond to major empires. The Antigonid dynasty in Macedon and Greece represented the ancient Greek Empire. The Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt represented the ancient Egyptian Empire. And the Seleucid dynasty in Syria and Mesopotamia represented the ancient Neo-Assyrian Empire. But the Attalid dynasty in Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, did not rise to its full potential until the Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Empire. Notice Daniel says, in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors come to the full. So not just in the latter time of their kingdom, but in the latter time when their rule comes to the full. So again, all 4 represented major empires, and 3 rose to their full potential in ancient times, except for the Turkish Empire, which did not rise to its full potential until 1299 CE and did not come to its end until 1923. Daniel says in the latter time of their kingdom, in other words, in the end of their kingdom, after they have all reached their full potential. In other words, Daniel was referring literally to the early 1920s when the final 4th kingdom came to its end. He says, "That is when the king of fierce countenance will rise, the eighth king who will destroy by peace." In 1920, the League of Nations was established, whose sole declared purpose was to maintain peace throughout the world. The League of Nations rose in 1920 in the latter time of the fourth kingdom that came out of Greece, and it came in the name of peace. The rise of the League of Nations, therefore, was an exact fulfillment of the rise of the eighth king in Daniel 8. Vatican City was not restored as its own country in Italy until 1929, but the League of Nations was a continuation of the Concert of Europe, a group created by two men from France and Britain after Napoleon destroyed the Holy Roman Empire. So that was the seventh head of the beast that was wounded and started right away creating the Concert of Europe, which then turned into the League of Nations, which then turned into the United Nations. That's the eighth king. It's the healed seventh head of the beast. So two men from France and Britain went to creating the Concert of Europe or League of Nations right after the Holy Roman Empire was destroyed by Napoleon. And in 1920, at the start of the League of Nations, France and Britain officially moved into the Middle East under the guise of helping them, but remained there as king. And again, that was a fulfillment of Daniel 10, the 20th day. Of course, we know they were already working toward that end at least 5 years before that in 1915, but in 1920, with the creation of the Peace Front, they were able to officially move into the region as protectorates. Russia was the third country involved in this takeover of the Middle East. Remember, Daniel 7 and 8 tells us that the little horn will subdue 3 kings. And this is important. Daniel 7 verses 23 through 24 says, "The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings." So this is the little horn it's talking about. The little horn shall rise after the 10 horns of the beast, and this little horn will subdue 3 kings. But notice that the word translated as after, number 311, also means future. And the word them is not actually in the original text. So Daniel 7 verse 24 is saying the 10 horns are 10 kings that will arise, and another shall rise in the future, and he will be diverse and will subdue 3 kings. In 1920, 3 kingdoms took over the Middle East: France, Russia, and Britain. You can see in this map here that France took over what is now known as Syria, Lebanon, and part of Turkey. Britain took over Iraq and part of Jordan, and Russia took over the eastern part of Turkey. The region around Jerusalem was made international territory at that time. In other words, it belonged to the League of Nations because the League of Nations is an international organization. In 1945, the League of Nations became the United Nations and now consists of 193 participating countries around the world. In other words, it covers the whole earth, just like Daniel predicted. And the region around Jerusalem, which they claimed as international territory in 1920, became the country of Israel that they created in 1947, 3 years after the League of Nations became the United Nations. Lamentations 2 is very clear that Israel is the little horn. He hath cut off in his anger all the horn of Israel. And Revelation 2 and 3 confirm that some of those who claim to be the Jews are not the Jews. They're lying about it. The Bible tells us clearly that Israel is the horn. The little horn that comes out of the beast subdues 3 others. It was the international territory, the territory owned by the League of Nations, which subdued the territories owned by France, Russia, and Britain, and rose as a superpower largely on the support of the Christian country of the United States of America. And the creation of this country of Israel was based on the Holocaust that occurred in Germany. And notice that Germany was the location where the Holy Roman Empire ruled just a few decades prior. So it was really the seventh head of the beast that likely perpetrated the Holocaust, as they also were responsible for some 5 million murders during the Inquisitions and Crusades as well. And notice the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, we're told, rises out of the sea, and all 7 heads, the 4 heads that came out of the Greek Empire and the Western, Eastern, and Holy Roman Empires, all surrounded the Mediterranean Sea. Also notice the Mediterranean Sea looks like the head of a beast with its tongue sticking out when viewed from the north. And the country of Israel looks like the horn on that beast out of the sea. So not only is there solid biblical confirmation that the little country of Israel is the little horn of the beast out of the sea, but there is visual confirmation in the landscape itself. The League of Nations, under the guise of their international territory of Israel, subdued the 3 other countries that took over that region in 1920, France, Britain, and Russia, and rose as a world superpower. But Daniel 7 verse 20 says the little horn has eyes and a mouth, and for this reason many Christians have believed that it represents a man. However, Daniel does not say that the little horn has the face of a man. It only has eyes and a mouth. Revelation 13 already explained to us what the mouth is. The mouth of the beast is the mouth of the lion. In Daniel, we're told the king of Babylon represented the lion. Therefore, Babylon is the mouth of the beast, and the little horn comes out of the beast. Therefore, the mouth that the little horn has is the mouth of the beast, which is Babylon. The eyes of the little horn are explained in Zechariah 4. It says there are 7 lamps or candlesticks, and they are the eyes of the Lord, which run to and fro throughout the whole earth. We're told in Revelation 1 that these 7 candlesticks refer to the churches. So the 7 candlesticks are both the churches and the eyes of the Lord throughout the whole earth. So the eyes refer to the churches of the Lord throughout the whole earth. Now here is the most important part. Who is the Lord in Zechariah 4? It is Yahweh, otherwise known as Yehovah or Jehovah. So the eyes of Yahweh are the candlesticks or churches throughout the whole earth. But what does this have to do with the little horn of the beast? The book of Hosea chapter 13 explains. It's talking about the chaff in verse 3, in other words, the tares. And it says in verse 4 that the Lord from the land of Egypt will be unto them as a lion in verse 7. The Lord will be unto them as a lion, as a leopard, and will meet them as a bear, and there will devour them. But look who is devouring them. It tells us right here it is the beast. It says the wild beast shall tear them. But who is devouring them? The Lord. The Lord will be unto them as a lion, as a leopard, and a bear. The Lord will devour them. The beast will tear them. So it's telling us right here in Hosea who the beast is exactly. It is the Lord. And in Hosea, this word Lord again refers to Yahweh or Jehovah. Revelation 13 says, "The beast with 7 heads and 10 horns was like unto a leopard, had the feet of a bear, and the mouth of a lion." And Hosea tells us clearly that this refers to Lord Yahweh. This is extremely important and crucial in order to understand who the little horn is, because the eyes of the little horn of the beast refer to the churches of Yahweh throughout the whole earth, and the mouth of the little horn of the beast refers to the lion of Babylon. So when we read Deuteronomy 32 verses 1 through 3, where it says, "Hear the words of my mouth, O earth," we know it's talking about Babylon, because the mouth is the lion and the lion is Babylon. Deuteronomy 32 is telling us that Babylon wants the earth to hear its words. And then it says, "Publish the name Yahweh and attribute to Yahweh the greatness of the Elohim." It was Babylon that published the name Yahweh, and that is when the Israelites began worshiping the false god. The Bible is clear that the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns is Yahweh. Yahweh will be unto them as the lion, the leopard, and the bear, and will devour them. The beast will tear them. Yahweh then has 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast is like a leopard, so the 7 heads are the 4 heads of the leopard plus the 3 heads of the terrible beast, the Western, Eastern, and Holy Roman Empire. The mouth of the beast was the Babylonian Empire, and the feet of the beast was the Persian Empire. The 10 horns of the beast occur during the feet at the tail end of the timeline, and remember Revelation 17 tells us the 8th king is the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. That means the 10 horns rise up during the reign of the 8th king. End time Babylon, we're told, sits on the beast with 10 horns. Therefore, Babylon the Great sits on the 8th king. We are right now in 2016 in the 70th year of that 8th king. The first year of the United Nations was from the fall of 1945 to the fall of 1946. 2016 is literally the 70th year of the 8th king. It is the 70th year that the territories around Judah have served the king of Babylon. Babylon sits on the beast, which is Yahweh. The beast has 7 heads, and we're told those 7 heads represent both 7 kings and 7 mountains. We're told the beast with 7 heads is the 8th king, and the 8th king will devour the whole earth. If Babylon sits on the beast, and the beast devours the whole earth, then Babylon sits on the whole earth. That means the 7 mountains that Babylon sits on are the 7 continents. We are also told Babylon sits on people of different nationalities and languages. If Babylon sits on the beast, then which people is Babylon sitting on? Babylon sits therefore on the people of the beast. In other words, the people who worship the beast. If the beast is Yahweh, then the people that worship the beast are those who worship Yahweh. That refers to the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. This area in pink represents the Abrahamic religions. It represents Babylon the Great. It is the great city that reigns over the kings of the earth. It is also where the bodies of the 2 witnesses will lie unburied. The 2 witnesses are the 2 candlesticks and 2 olive trees, which Zechariah tells us refer to the eyes of Yahweh throughout the whole earth. In other words, the eyes of the beast. throughout the whole earth. The candlesticks are also the churches. So the two witnesses are the churches of Yahweh throughout the whole earth. Jeremiah tells us that when Babylon is destroyed, the slain will lie unburied over the whole earth. Revelation 11 tells us the slain include the two witnesses who it says will be killed by the beast at the end of 1260 days or years. Their Lord is the beast. The United Nations is the beast. Revelation 11 tells us they will lie unburied in the great city, which is Babylon the Great, where their Lord, the beast, will be destroyed. Word number 4717 doesn't just mean crucified, it also means destroy or destroy its power utterly. This is the great city called Babylon the Great, also spiritually called Egypt and Sodom. The great stone from heaven will hit the Sea of Babylon, which is the Atlantic Ocean, at the end of 1260 years and at the end of 70 years, starting the final 3.5 years of literal atmospheric darkness and war that end in their final destruction. The beast with 7 heads and 10 horns is Yahweh. The Lamb who speaks like a dragon was the false prophet, the Pope, who caused all to worship the beast Yahweh and declared himself God in the temple during the Holy Roman Empire during the 1260 years of tribulation when the waters, 5 million people, were turned to blood. The Holy Roman Empire gained its temporal power between the years 754 to 756 by the estimate of many scholars. 1260 years from that ends in 2016. The 7th head of the beast was the Holy Roman Empire, which was wounded in 1870 and healed in 1920 when it rose again in the name of peace. The 8th king, who is of the 7, is the United Nations, who is also the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. The 10 horns are the 10 regions of the world that the Club of Rome appointed, the same Club of Rome that declared humanity as the enemy under the guise of the climate crisis. The little horn is the country of Israel created by the 8th king. Its eyes are the churches of Yahweh throughout the whole earth. The mouth of the little horn is Babylon, who is the harlot who sits on the beast, who sits on the whole world, on all 7 continents, and sits on the people who worship the beast, the religions that literally worship Yahweh. Do you know anyone who is worshiping the beast and the little horn right now? And do you think they deserve to know the truth? Even if they don't hear us, we still, knowing the truth, have the responsibility to tell them. For more information, please see the playlist Bible's Countdown to the Meteorite and Rescue, linked here and on my main channel page. Thank you to those who support this work of real truth. I hope you're doing well, and I'll talk to you next week.